NVIDIA controls about 90% of the entire AI chip market. With that much control, a company does not need to change anything for anyone. But this year, NVIDIA had to send an already finished chip back to the drawing board and rebuild parts of it under pressure. The reason is a new chip from AMD built on a 2-nanometer process, something NVIDIA currently has no answer for. That single fact is why this story matters. And it is exactly where this script begins. The chip is called the Instinct MI455X. It is built on TSMC's 2-nanometer process, packed with 320 billion transistors spread across 12 separate chiplets working as one unit. NVIDIA's competing chip, called Vera Rubin, is still built on an older 3-nanometer class process. For the first time in a decade, AMD reached a smaller, newer manufacturing process before NVIDIA did. When the first spec sheets came out, it looked like NVIDIA was still winning. AMD listed a compute number of 2.9. NVIDIA listed 3.6. On paper, that is a clear win for NVIDIA. But those two numbers were never measuring the same thing. NVIDIA's number came from something called sparse compute, which means the chip skips certain calculations it decides are not needed, then counts the time it saved as extra performance. AMD's number came from dense compute, meaning it does every single calculation with nothing skipped. Once both chips get tested under the same rules, dense against dense, AMD's MI455X actually beats NVIDIA's Vera Rubin by around 15% in peak performance. The number everyone quoted first was backwards. Memory is where AMD is not just competing, it is clearly ahead. The MI455X carries 432 gigabytes of memory on a single chip. NVIDIA's chip carries 288. AMD built this chip specifically to avoid that problem. A single chip does not win a market, though. Big AI companies buy entire racks, full systems with cooling, networking, and software bundled together. This is where AMD made one of its smartest moves in years, buying a company called ZTT Systems for close to $5 billion just to build complete rack-scale systems instead of loose chips. The result is called Helios. One Helios rack holds 72 MI455X chips, uses full liquid cooling, and delivers 31 terabytes of memory across the whole rack. NVIDIA's competing rack offers 20.7 terabytes. Again, AMD is not just matching NVIDIA, it is beating it at the system level. Here is the part almost nobody noticed. According to industry analysts, once AMD revealed the MI455X's memory speed at 19.6 terabytes per second, NVIDIA quietly went back and changed Vera Rubin. Power draw jumped from 1,500 watts per chip to 2,300 watts. Memory bandwidth targets got pushed from around 13 terabytes per second up to 22, then finally landed at 23.3 at launch, just barely ahead of AMD's number. That final edge cost NVIDIA a jump to 2,500 watts of power per chip. Software is still AMD's weak spot. NVIDIA built something called CUDA years ago, and it became the standard that almost every AI developer learned first. AMD's answer is called ROCm, and it has always lagged behind in stability and support. AMD knows this, so instead of trying to fix it alone, the company partnered with Anthropic. Now come the deals, and this is where the story gets impossible to ignore. OpenAI signed on for up to 6 gigawatts of AMD compute power. As part of that deal, OpenAI also received the right to buy up to 160 million shares of AMD stock at just 1 cent each, unlocking in stages tied to AMD's stock price, climbing all the way up to $600 a share. Meta signed its own separate 6 gigawatt deal on the same Helios system. Microsoft committed to rolling Helios out across its Azure cloud platform. Mazda just built a full engineering department around an engine that the whole car industry buried in 2012. Not a side project, not a nostalgia trip. A real department with 36 engineers whose only job is to bring this engine back into production cars. And the engine everyone thought was dead is now sitting quietly inside some of Mazda's most important vehicles right now. The engine is the rotary. And to understand why it died in the first place, picture two very different ways of making power. Most cars use pistons that slam up and down thousands of times a minute. The rotary throws that idea away completely. Air and fuel get pulled in, squeezed, ignited, and pushed out, all through one smooth spinning motion. Mazda licensed this idea from a German engineer named Felix Wankel back in the 1960s, at a time when other big manufacturers had already looked at it and walked away. Mazda did not walk away. In 1967, the company released the Cosmo Sport, proving the rotary could actually work on real roads. It became the heart of the company's identity for decades. The RX-7 turned it into a cult favorite. In 1991, a four-rotor version called the 787B won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and to this day, Mazda is still the only Japanese manufacturer to ever win that race, and the only team to ever win it with a non-piston engine. But the rotary had two problems that never went away. Its combustion chamber had an awkward shape, so fuel never burned as completely as it did in a normal engine. That hurt fuel economy and made the exhaust dirtier. On top of that, small parts called apex seals, sitting on the tips of that spinning triangle, wore out faster than engineers wanted. As emissions rules got stricter around the world through the 1980s and 1990s, the rotary kept falling further behind. By 2012, Mazda finally gave up. The RX-8 was pulled from production, and almost every car journalist on Earth wrote the same line. This engine is finished. It was not finished. In June 2023, Mazda quietly restarted rotary production inside a car called the MX-30 e-Skyactiv Rev. And this is where the story flips completely. The rotary in this car never touches the wheels. It never drives anything directly. An electric motor handles 100% of the driving, exactly like a normal EV.
Delivering fuel straight into the combustion chamber
that tops up the battery when it runs low. It is called a range extender, and that single detail solves the rotary's oldest weakness almost by accident. A car engine has to constantly change speed, crawling in traffic, climbing hills, racing on the highway. And that constant change is exactly what used to wreck the rotary's efficiency. A generator does not do any of that. Mazda did not just drop the old engine back in either. This new unit is called the 8C.